If you've watched any of my previous videos about getting started foraging, you might have come away with the impression that I was trying to discourage people from doing it on the grounds that it's difficult. Reality is there are risks, and I just want you to be safe. So with that in mind, we're going to look at a plant that is ideal for foraging beginners because it's tasty, it's common, and it's easy to identify safely. We're going to be looking at crow garlic, Allium vineale, one of 3 species of wild onion native to the UK. The distribution of this plant is quite broad. It's native to Europe, the Middle East and Africa, and it's also been introduced into the USA and Australia, where I understand it's quite invasive. In early spring, crow garlic sends up tufts of blue-green tubular leaves resembling chives. These are edible and delicious, but for people starting out foraging, I'm not going to recommend picking at this stage because there are quite a lot of other spring bulbs and plants also putting up shoots at that time. And some of those other things are sort of similar looking and are toxic. It is possible to tell the difference once you know the plant, but that isn't the place to start. Crow garlic has a trick up its sleeve. In summer, in place of flowers, crow garlic produces a tightly packed spherical cluster of tiny bulbs called bulbils. Sometimes the cluster is actually in the form of 2 or 3 spheres sort of formed together. This cluster is at the very top of a stiff, wiry stalk, between 30 centimetres and 1 metre tall. And it's this structure we're going to focus on today because with just a little care and attention, it's pretty unmistakable. In my part of the world, the central south coast of England, crow garlic typically produces exclusively bulbils, no flowers at all. In some other places, it produces pinkish-purple flowers on little slender stalks mixed in with the bulbils. In fact, this specimen here, with 3 little flowers sprouting out there, is the first time I've ever found it with the flowers present. At first, the bulbils are glossy, and they're deep green and maroon red in colour. We'll take a closer look at the individual bulbils in just a moment. In shady and more damp places, the bulbils might actually start sprouting their own little shoots while they're still attached to the parent plant. In drier and more sunny places, they tend to mature and fall off first. As they mature in midsummer, they develop a papery outer covering, just like regular onions, and may appear more a sort of reddish-brown or tan colour. At this point, they detach easily from the stalk, and when you pick them, the whole cluster crumbles easily into a mass of tiny little onions, each about the size of a grain of rice or wheat. Oh, hello, spider. Each individual bulbil, if you examine it closely, looks like a tiny shallot bulb, because this really is literally a tiny little onion. Here's one against a rule for scale. Those numbers are centimetres, the smaller divisions are millimetres. They have that sort of silvery sheen that you might have noticed on full-size onions, and even when they're whole and uncrushed like this, a handful of these bulbils has a faint garlic or onion aroma. Crow garlic is found at the edges of cultivated fields, on roadsides, especially banks and well-drained sort of sandy or gravelly areas. I wouldn't recommend picking it to eat from the side of a busy road, but dry roadside verges and hedgerows are a good place to find it for study and familiarisation. It's also common as a coastal plant, growing in amongst grasses and other plants on dunes, sandy cliffs and shingle banks well above the high tide line. In the UK, there really aren't any other native plants you can completely mistake for crow garlic in midsummer. There are plenty of other plants that may have seed heads at or near the top of a stalk. For example, here's soft rush, which does look superficially quite similar, but when you look closer, it's quite different. Crow garlic is the only native UK plant that produces these distinctive tiny little onions in a tight, neat cluster at the very tip of a tough, wire-like stalk. I can't say for sure that that holds true in other parts of the world, so if you're not in the UK, you should check with a reliable source that knows your own area. But these little bulbils, being just tiny onions, are edible. And it's really easy to pick them as you walk along just by cupping your hand under them and gently squeezing, then tipping the bulbils into a bag or container. Here, at the start of July, they're so ready to drop that they almost explode apart when you handle them. As always with foraging, it's important to respect the resources that you're using, so I recommend that at first you only pick a very small amount to see if it's something you like. If you come back for more, I think it's important never to pick all of what you find, because after all, these bulbils are the reproductive mechanism for this plant. Of course, each parent plant is producing many offspring, so there are plenty to spare, but I think it's good to pay it back by scattering some of the bulbils that you gather in a place where it looks like they might grow. Just as a side note though, this plant can be very invasive and hard to control in a garden, so think twice before introducing it there. So I've picked some crow garlic, let's head back to Atomic Shrimp HQ and try cooking it. What these tiny onions lack in size, they make up for in number and in flavour. Remember though, this is garlic, and if you burn it, it will taste unbelievably bitter. I made that mistake the first time I cooked with it. This time though, I thought since it looks like weird rice, it might be interesting to cook it along with some rice. So that's what I did. 1 part crow garlic bulbils to 3 parts rice. Then I tried to wash it together with the rice, which was a mistake because some of it floated and I had to mess around with a sieve. Apologies for the weird lighting here also, by the way. This was recorded late in the evening because I wanted to cook the rice and onions together completely, then chill it down overnight to make fried rice the next day. As it was cooking, I was trying to pin down what was so familiar about the aroma. It smells great, that is, if you like onions and garlic. In fact, it smells really rich and savoury. I eventually figured out, to me, when it's cooking, it smells a bit like a mixture of garlic, onion and ginger. This, I think, is going to be perfect for fried rice. So after chilling the rice down quickly and storing it overnight, the next day it's time. I am really going to eat 1,000 onions today. I started off just frying some pieces of thick bacon and some little sticks of carrot, then a few sliced chilies. Give that a minute or two to come together. Then some Chinese leaves, just the thicker parts. Now the cooked rice together with the crow garlic. Give that another minute or two, stirring occasionally. While we're waiting for that, I beat a couple of eggs. Now the leafy bits of the Chinese leaf, which hardly need any cooking at all, and then move everything to one side. A little bit more oil, fry the egg until it's kind of halfway between scrambled egg and a broken omelette. Then break it up, not too small, a little bit of salt, not too much because the bacon is quite salty, and then mix everything together. And I discovered at the back of the fridge one last unopened jar of my lacto-fermented vegetable pickle I made last year. The acidity of this pickle will be just the right little note to balance the fatty bacon and the rice and the egg. So there it is, and you can see the little onion bulbs in the rice still completely intact. The flavour is really great. It's a little bit hard to describe, but it's different enough from regular onions and garlic to make this well worth seeking out. It definitely has notes of both onion and garlic, and I still think I can taste something a little bit like ginger in there too, as well as a little bit of an earthy, savoury note like you get from baked potato skins. Because I cook these tiny onions with the rice, the flavour permeates the rice, but you do get an extra little burst of it each time one of the bulbils pops as you're chewing. I'll be completely honest with you and say that I think I picked these bulbils just a tiny bit late, and the papery outer skin was ever so slightly tough on a few of them. But only on some, and this was only really noticeable if I picked them out and ate them on their own. When they were mixed in with the rice, it was just like a sort of whole grains texture, which was quite nice. So I think this is one worth looking out for, and I think it hits all the right buttons for anyone wanting to get started foraging. It's common, it's very easy to safely identify and gather, and it has a flavour that's both good and unique. And perhaps best of all, you get to tell people you ate 1,000 onions for lunch. I hope this was interesting. In future episodes, I'll be looking at a few more plants that fit this brief of being common, simple to identify and tasty. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.